G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic start to your week. Now you do have to excuse me for wearing the same jacket and the same tie every single day at the moment. As you know, I have moved and I've got stuff in boxes absolutely everywhere, and I'm not going to get to it even today because I've got to go and lie in an MRI machine for an hour and all of that. But I'll let you know how I go tomorrow. Legends, we do have a lot to go over today. We need to look at the maps. There has been significant shifts on the maps and a whole new area which we haven't seen move in a very long time. So we need to talk about that. I want to look at what Joe Rogan has said on his podcast and what the response has been to this, but also where I think there could be a really good opportunity as well. I need to look at some strikes, ATACMS, as well as some weapon systems, and of course will we see Russian response with the Oreshnik. I want to talk about potential of Houthis within Russia fighting, and I want to talk about will there be a large assault to try and capture Zaporizhia city, and what is the actual manpower situation there as well. So look, where we're going to start is we're actually going to start with the map. So let's zoom out. Here we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv in the center of your screen. Now, we see the red areas. These have been occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Now, instantly you can see on this map, there is a lot of red popping up. Now, there's been something in the vicinity of about 50 square kilometers by Deep State recorded loss to the Russian forces today. Most of this is around Kursk and Velika Novosilka as well. But this tells us more of a picture when we look at something like this. Now, I have said exponential. That is incorrect. It's more polynomial or quadratic increase here. But as you can see, up to November the 25th, that I'm just going to call this 600 square kilometers, opposed to the 490 from October, the 400 in September, the 360 in August. And you can see this increasing rate as well. So this is of great concern. Not only is Russia continuing to then take and occupy ground, but it is increasing the rate of which it does. And these gains around that 50 square kilometers a day, we have not seen that movement since February, March 2022. At this point, almost three, well, it's 2.5 to 3 years ago in the coming months. I can't believe how late it is in 2024. So this is telling a fairly dire story when you look at that. Now, I know that is being ignored by lots. It shouldn't be. That is of great concern. That if you fully believe that the Russians are out of men, out of tanks, out of this, fighting with shovels, then how is that continuing day on day on day? Now, let's go down to where I believe is potentially the primary axis at the moment in Velika Novosilka. And we can see there has been another major advancement into here from yesterday. And that was a major advancement yesterday. If we step back, let's have a look at this. Sorry, day prior. It's annoying when it doesn't actually show me like through the days on this. I don't know why the update has done this up here, but regardless, let's have a look and let's have a measurement. So let's go right on the outskirts to here, 670 meters. Other page I'm seeing is within 500 meters, but regardless, we can see that even the gray zone is right up to the outskirts of Velika Novosilka as well. So let's see where other maps are showing this movement or what they are saying is happening in here. Now, I've got a geolocation for you, and this geolocation is of a Russian column moving in this area, right in between basically these two right here, right in the direction of Velika Novosilka, and we'll show you this footage here. I can't show you all of this. Again, this will be on the Telegram if you'd like to go and have a look. There is a lot of fighting in that footage as well. Movement up, and will this area come under control? And this is going to wreak havoc on the areas south of here as well. So strap in to see what happens here in the next coming days. And we have two Syriac map updates. So this red dot is Rozdolne, this is Velika Novosilka, and you can see further advancements in all of these areas, especially importantly around this defensive line, which just sits, if we zoom in, this Yasna Polenya just north of here. So up in here is here. There is a defensive line along where these tree lines are in here, has come under Russian control. So that is a very interesting update in this area. Syriac showing advancements, and then we get further to Syriac's next advancement, and this is what we get. Russian army took full control of the eastern warehouses of Velika Novosilka. So he's saying that they have broken in and that they are controlling warehouses. They're in captured trenches east of the Kashlash River. In addition, Russian forces advanced north of the main trench systems, northeast of the town. So they're moving to the north, maybe an envelopment and potentially cutting off these roads to the north, as we do know that if Russia was able to move in, have at least just strategic, maybe fire control on these roads. This is what we'd see Russia do again and again, is this envelopment. And they've been pushing pretty hard through Rivnopol as well. If they can get cut off this road, it's going to really, really slow logistics down moving cross country. And we could see this whole area, which was one of the primary areas of the Ukrainian 23 counteroffensive, come under control fairly quickly. And this does put areas to the west of here in harm's way. So Velika Novosilka is an area everyone needs to be watching, as there is a hell of a lot of ground being made by the Russian forces there every single day. So let's just move east of here, and we have a lot of red. Firstly, let's go down in this Ilyininkia front down in here, and this grey zone has been caught up and then is showing red. I believe too we will see this whole salient here at some point close up. We have been seeing it day to day closing up. So let's have a look here. Suryak's first map is showing fairly similar, a little bit more control, but realistically the same amount, but definitely more out to the south of Dalny here. But you can see what is occurring on that first map. We jump then to the second map, and it's showing more control, filling in this grey zone in here just to the north of Ilyinka. At the end of the day, this grey zone was like the grey zone in here yesterday. This is going to come under Russian control within the next few days, and I do believe the next updates we'll see is something like this come under red, this come under red, and it will probably likely come up until it runs to this road. Will it stop there? Well, we don't really know. We do know Russia will want to push on this axis, as there is a lack of fortifications, at least by the maps we use and trust, to the northwest of here. So again, wait and see for what actually occurs on this front. Then of course we have Kursk. This map showing that the Russians have moved a fair way into Kursk itself as well. This grey zone should be all the way expanded out in my belief, but definitely some movement there. So we move up to the north of Kursk, Beretsky, a large amount of Russian ground being made from Ilyininkia Mark II, and to the northeast of Sontivskaya as well. There are a number of areas that have come under Russian occupation today in this area. And then we have a look, Suryak maps. Look, this is lining up fairly close, at least to the south of Voznesenka, down this tray line. But we can see a large amount of Russian ground through Sontivskaya being shown by Suryak, not being shown on the deep state. Regardless, one of the biggest concerns here should be if the Russians can close up, say, through something like this. Kursk may just stay like that and fire control north to south across into Kursk. This is why I believe that the Ukrainians cut this bridge. Again, it looks like a controlled demolition. We know that there was flooding in here of about 1.5 meters. This road, as far as we believe, sits more than that 1.5 meters, or it's going to be light flooding on there, so things still should be able to move down this, but it may stop the Russians doing a hook maneuver and cutting off all of that logistic supply, or troops then rotating in and out of this area. But again, we're just going to have to wait and see exactly what occurs. And then we come up to the Zoroya, Selyadov, or really just the Pokrovsk front. And what people have noted that I missed yesterday is in the last couple of updates, we have seen that Russia has actually come to the west of Pokrovsk. If we were to line that right up, this is not just sitting, in line or to the east. It's now sitting to the west of it. Is this forming the first part of the flank maneuver? Potentially, but I do believe Pokrovsk, Minograd, this is still a while away. Like we see, Russia likes to envelop things. It's not looking like the development of that straight away. I think they're focusing Velika, Kursk, some other areas before we see much movement, but there is a lot of movement in here today. So let's talk about Selyadov, and we do have a couple of map updates for you. Let me get this so you can see it. So this blue dot up here, I believe this is Zvote. So right up in here, that this whole area has then come under control, including Postyinka and Yurivkia as well by then the Suryak map. So you can see where this tree line is running straight line down here. It is basically saying that they've moved all the way up to there, including around Zoroya as well. A capturing half of that locality. And then we have a second update on top of this, showing the movement to Zvolte here as well, but showing the gains from the last Syriac map. That was day 1004, and that's day 1005. I can't believe that we are that far through this war. So let's continue moving our way up before we get into Kursk. Now, Chasiv Yar. This is an area which we have seen a lot of movement to the south, some movement to the north, some movement in the center, but nothing like huge, not like the other areas. But one thing we do see a lot of here is more close fire support, which we don't see in other areas of the front line due to the prevalence of man-pads and air defense. And these are two Su-35 bombers here, the Rooks flying and dropping major munitions on Chasiv Yar itself. So that is one development we see there, and we have been reporting this over the last months, that there is far more of that fast air working closer in Chasiv Yar than other areas. So it gives us an idea of what weapons may or may not be there, such as man-pads, that these are highly susceptible to. Then we move into Terny, Torsky front line, and we have nothing shown on this map, but we do have on Syriac, just to the east of Terny, a small bit of ground being made. Remember, this shows a lot more control into the green down here than Deep State's map. Noel reports shows more similar to what Syriac is showing than what Deep State is showing right around here. So let's move our way up, and then we have Kopanki in here. Now, of course, we had that geolocation of those Russian forces working here, still shown as grey zone, but the Deep State has confirmed this, saying this, a third Met company of the 2nd MB of this cleared Kopanki of the bastards, and showing some prisoners that have been taken. Recent publication showed the Russians crept into the village of Kopanki and hung up their rag, the enemy pressing there because the junction of the lanes into units. So saying that they did clearing the settlement and have taken some prisoners of war also. So a lot of fighting going up on here. Remember, the reason that this is such a struggle is because Russia got to the Oskil through Pishani, and you can see the red north of here moving. We saw it move out of Berestov. That front line come. The logistics in here will be very difficult. This is all part, I believe, of trying to envelop and take the hub in here of Kupiansk. Now, this is no different because we come just north of Kupiansk, and you can see this small sliver of red in here where the Russians have crossed the Oskil. Now, I didn't expect this, and we haven't seen movement here for a long time. There's a lot of then a steep side bank off the Oskil in here, not making it a great spot for a movement across, but it does look like the Russians have able to move across and take some ground here, opening up a whole other axis. Remember, this is what you do if you are the numerically larger force in an attritional war, that you open up as many fronts as you can maintain, and you keep your opposing force trying to run between, trying to stabilize that. So now Ukraine, who is already struggling for manpower, is going to have to move troops from someone else to try and stabilize this, and it's that sort of cat and mouse game. The Russian boats landed through Oskil south of this area, and today they carried out a rather unexpected operation. They crossed the Oskil on boats from this area and entrenched themselves on the western bank. This is not overcoming a water obstacle for the sake of a photo, because the enemy has taken the positions of one of our brigades. We hope that that gift will be smoked, that the LBZ will return to its place. So again, saying this isn't just for a photo op, which we have seen, of course, Russians and Ukrainian forces legitimately do like photo op bloody missions, some of which have had high losses, but they're saying that they've taken some of the positions in here too. We haven't seen really any movement up here. That, you know, it could be a degree of complacency as well. Like I said, though, now troops are going to have to move up to try and stabilise this. Such events bring with them intensification of artillery and mortar fire, so remind the residents of these areas and communities to evacuate. Remember, the areas around here have been evacuated for some time. Kupiansk would be the major area here where the Russians are trying to get to. That would change a lot. Now, this area that is being occupied back into Russia around Suja has shown no changes on this map today, but I want to show you a couple of changes and geolocations too. Firstly, let's look at what Syriac is saying. So just on the western side, Konevsky district, Russian army took full control of Dardino. So I'll show you, Dardino is right down in here. We've seen some geolocations yesterday, but on the Suja district, Ukrainian army advanced northeast of Martinovka and entered the farms of Kuglik. So let's have a look out to the northeast in here. Now, I'll show you this better. This is Martinovka, and I'll show you actually the geolocation. It doesn't show it on this map, this Kuglik. So just outside of the grey zone, it's like this. So we have the two spires. It's right in around here is where the geolocation was of Ukrainian positions targeted by Russian drones. So this is a Russian drone, low battery warning, then targeting Ukrainian positions in this direction. So we can assume, well, there are Ukrainian positions out here. There has been a successful advancement of the Ukrainian forces on that front line. So let's have a look at a couple of strikes and then we'll continue. So there has been more ATACMS fired into Kursk, and Ukrainian Ministry of Defense is claiming that an S-400 has been destroyed. Again, wait for any photographs of this. But again, we had those initial ATACMS go in, we had the Storm Shadows go in, we had massive claims around that. We haven't seen any evidence of that yet. And then, of course, we saw Russia use the Oryshnik. Now, again, we have no idea of what damage that caused. I've seen some photographs showing just like minor damage to residential properties. I've seen other claims that are huge. Again, I don't know. One thing I will say, some of the videos were just like minor damage to like the facade of a house. A bit like, even with nothing on, like no explosive on that, just something coming at that speed would do more damage than that. I could do more damage riding my bicycle into a wall than some of that. So I don't think we'll ever see this because there's so many rules around satellite imagery over Ukraine's a lot of control there. But again, we'll see. But the main thing is, will we see Russia use that system again now that we're seeing the ATACMS haven't stopped? And like I've said, is I think Ukraine needed to continue the ATACMS strikes because otherwise Putin will go, well, the escalation obviously works. That's great. We'll continue this. But of course, then they may continue it. It's a really rock and a hard place. This is off a friend of mine. Now we know the response, or at least the initial one, the Oryshnik. I interpret it as a warning sign of some sort, but it's a pretty vague one. Since Ukraine is still using ATACMS in Kursk, I'd expect Russia to escalate further, since an Oryshnik strike has proved ineffective as dissuasion. So will we see, I think potentially, we may not see another Oryshnik, but we may see a nuclear test somewhere in Russia's training grounds for that system. How will that affect it? This is just something I saw as well. This is a Yak-B. This is a multi-barreled gun, typically off a Russian assault helicopter that they're using here as a counter UAV, so counter drone. But very interesting, what I found is actually this thermal sight that they are using and how that may pick up on a drone. I wish I could see it more. If you find any footage like that of that thermal system, please send it across to me. I'd be very interested. So let's talk about Rogan, or Daddy Rogan, as I've said here. One thing I want to say is Rogan, more often than not, does reflect how many people are feeling. You don't become the biggest show in the world, not just in his category, the biggest in the world by a margin, for nothing. You don't become that for nothing. He obviously, a lot of people feel the way that he feels. So let's have a little bit of a look at what he has said, and I'll give you a bit of a too long.
Savers right now, they're launching missiles into Russia.
Yeah.
So look, I'm going to put this on the Telegram, but basically what he does is he's criticising Biden for allowing these missiles being fired back into Russia in the last couple of months of his term, being like, we have really escalated things before someone else is coming in. Are you potentially trying to jeopardise then the Trump administration coming in, and also the threat and fears of world war? And he makes some comments about like, fuck, basically like, fuck doing this. We can't support Ukraine anymore, that this has become such a threat of like a nuclear weapon. And I've seen some response to this going, well, Joe's being influenced by Russian propaganda, which I disagree with. I don't think he is. I think he's speaking his mind like he always does. And criticises further support and, you know, a need for negotiation, and that it doesn't want to see nuclear escalation. And this is one thing I want to say about this, is most people, and you and I are here, you're 15 minutes, 20 minutes into a video about nuance certain aspects of the Ukrainian-Russian war. You are in the 1% of people who of, I guess, knowledge and interest in this war. Most people don't have that. Most people have knowledge and interest in other areas, and that's completely fine. But most people's concerns are inward-looking, less so than outward. Your family, your friends, fuel, groceries, schooling. And this is one of the big reasons, I'll say, that Trump was elected over Harris. And there seems to be a feeling amongst many Americans and many Australians as well, that, well, when is the time to look after us and stop looking after them? Now, whether this is right or wrong needs nuance and an understanding of geopolitics. But what Joe said is exactly how I think many people feel. They're going, well, this war was, we were supplying these systems, but now we've seen a system used that could, end our way of life. Holy shit, maybe we need to think about this. What I will say is nuclear threats actually do work. Just like we saw the NATO leader, one of the NATO military leaders say, if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, we would have deployed in. So we do know it works, because just the threat of the use of this can end people's entire way of life. Now, that isn't Russian propaganda. That is the reality of nuclear weapons. Now, where the propaganda is how close to are we for one being used or not. And there's propaganda both ways. There's propaganda that say we're not even close, never going to be used. There's propaganda saying we're about to push the button. There's propaganda both ways. Propaganda has a very negative term, but propaganda is just information that is moved in a way to suit your narrative. Propaganda happens every day. Marketing is just propaganda. You get on a tram and there's an ad for McDonald's. That is a form of propaganda. But this is something I want to break down too. Now, me and Drew probably disagree on some things. That's great. That's part of the world. But Zelensky should go on Rogan. I'm not even kidding. And I agree with him 1,000,000% on this. I think Zelensky should go on Rogan. But I also think Zelensky should accept Tucker Carlson's interview request after he interviewed Vladimir Putin. With Joe, remember that Rogan has more power than all the media basically combined. And what you need to do, what Ukraine needs to do, what Zelensky needs to do, is he needs to swing people onto the Ukrainian cause, not just continue on echo chamber media. And this is exactly what Kamala Harris did. And I think one of the reasons she got absolutely bloody Trump wiped the floor with her was it was a lot of this like echo chamber stuff that she's on the Call Me Daddy podcast, didn't do Rogan, things like that. But the Call Me Daddy podcast with Kamala, that didn't change anyone's vote ears, where Rogan probably had a lot of people on the fence, or maybe could swing people from Republican to Democrats. And with Zelensky, say, on CNN, he's not changing anyone's mind. If he went on Rogan, which Rogan would 1,000% have him, no worries at all, he could potentially change a lot of people's minds. Potentially it could backfire there as well, but it would be very interesting. I agree with Drew. I think the best move for Zelensky would actually now be like, Joe, I want to come on, I want to talk about Ukraine for 3 hours, what has happened and what the future is. You can't, if you're just appealing to people that already agree with you, it's not going to increase or decrease influence. It's just speaking into an echo chamber void. Because what I believe is happening with a lot of the media around Zelensky on Reddit, on Blue Sky, even on Twitter within algorithms, is just confirmation bias. That it's all this, everyone agrees, and it's just confirmation bias, which is important in propaganda. That confirmation bias definitely is. But I believe too, with what we're seeing in the States, that there needs to be more explanation and maybe potentially more people swing onto Zelensky's cause. And I think Rogan would be a great way to do that. And he would happily, I believe, have Zelensky on. So let's talk about the situation down in the south. What we're talking about is around Zaporizhia in here out of Kyiv. So let's talk over this situation from The Economist. Now, this is titled, Ukraine's warriors brace for a Kremlin surge in the south. And Putin's war machine is pushing harder, crushing Ukrainian morale. After 10 days in the trenches of Robotny, Grisha is ready for arrest. Time for sex, drugs, and rock and roll. His voice lit jittery from the frontline adrenaline. 36-year-old infantryman just marched 7 kilometres from his position, hauling 60 kilograms of equipment. The physical toll of being in the infantry is only understood by the infantry. That's going to become more relevant in a sec. In 23, during Ukraine's failed counteroffensive, every square metre of this ground was a subject of world news. Now the Russians are pushing back and far fewer are paying attention. It's happening. His eyes looking into imagined middle distance. You can see it. They are coming, crawling up and over, trying for any way through. So Russian assaults in this direction. Ukrainian intelligence believes that Russia is gearing up for a bold assault on Zap City, 30 k's from the front. It's one of 3 remaining centres of heavy industry in the country. Putin claimed the entire province as his own with a sham referendum, saying all this, and of course he wasn't occupying all of it at the time. One thing we have spoken about a lot on this channel over the past month is that there has been a huge increase in Russian glide bombs landing in Zap City itself. A Ukrainian spokesman warns 130,000 Russian troops could be soon hurled into the fray, which would be dramatic if that many more soldiers were to enter the battlefield, with how things are already going, as I've shown you on the maps. Now, it doesn't make sense to me really to push here, unless the Ukrainian manpower and fortification situation is way worse than we are reporting, and way worse than it is seen, this axis doesn't make sense. Some of the best fortifications for Ukraine is actually in the direction between Tokmak and Zap, as well as the other way too. This is where some of the best Russian fortifications are. To push in this direction would be a hell of a fight. I don't see why this axis would make sense over getting in behind in other areas of the front line, with this barely moving now for a couple of years. But again, we'll wait and see. It's going to do a lot with what the Russian situation looks like there, and the ability to actually trick forces to get through that fortified line, but also how many Ukrainians are actually there. Again, we're presuming those fortifications are built, are reinforced, are manned to a fair strength. Again, we don't know. Not every soldier is convinced that an attack is imminent. This guy here, this colonel, is saying that Russia is tied up elsewhere, but also that claims that they plan to send 2 divisions before for the initial assault, but half were then diverted to Kursk. They aren't ready to hit it yet, but when they are, the first blow will be the hardest. So will they go for it? So he's not saying they're not, he's saying maybe not yet, we will see. But Ukraine is taking no chance. New fortifications are being built in rings radiating from the provincial capital. The work is thorough minefields, engineering obstacles, and structures made of concrete and iron, unlike the more chaotic picture in neighbouring Donetsk province. I hope that those fortifications are, because I've heard that before and then seen the reality, and it isn't a great sight. Still the site of the heaviest fighting in Donetsk. Russia is moving faster than any time since the early days of the invasion. Hardened by blunders of 22, Russian commanders have developed a grim formula that works. Drones, EW, guided air launch bombs, ruthless command, and waves of disposable infantry. Again, it's different to this. It's use of reconnaissance infantry moving through on motorcycles, on buggies, armoured assaults, but also the acceptance of attritional war and the acceptance of hard losses. But this is sort of pushing on that narrative of just meat waves, which is not exactly true. Attritional warfare can look like that to a degree, but it's not this blow the whistle over the top boys running into muskets. They hit Ukraine where it's the weakest, cutting supply lines and encircling targets rather than striking them head on as they once did. It is not easy going, but they've been losing as many as 1,500 troops a day. That is, again, questionable. That is going off just official numbers, but again, all those numbers I would throw out. This head-on thing, this is that movement from manoeuvre to attritional. But they're recruiting more than they lose. This colonel again says, look, they will never have a problem with manpower. They drive people into debt, into loans, and will force them to fight for them. They aren't going to stop. Ukraine's problems, meanwhile, are worsening, mainly because of manpower issues. Again, grabbing guys still off the street. That doesn't scream that you're meeting your recruitment goals. The army is long out of willing recruits, and its mobilisation campaign is falling short, recruiting barely 2/3 of its target. A senior Ukrainian official says he's worried the situation may become irretrievable by the spring. An even bigger problem is the quality of new recruits. Again, this goes psychological and physical though. The ones who are willing, if you're saying they are long gone and now it's just mobilisation, what is the psychological grit of these guys? They don't want to be there. If they wanted to be, they would have signed up almost 3 years ago. But also now, these are older men. The commander says the men are being sent from army headquarters and are now mostly too old or unmotivated to be useful. All but a handful are over the age of 45. I'm being sent guys 50 plus with doctor's notes telling me they are too ill to serve. At times it feels like I'm managing a daycare centre rather than a combat unit. Again, these guys may be able to sit in a trench in defensive, but again, Ukraine's lofty goal to returning these areas militarily. You need fit, young, motivated guys to do offensive operations. Conducting off-ops, so offensive operations, is 10 times more difficult than def ops. Not only is it more difficult, you need significantly more men, 3-to-1, 5-to-1 more to be on the offensive than to be on the defensive at the moment, and Ukraine is struggling to hold the defensive positions at the moment. I don't see how, without massive mobilisation, without successes to have people willing to sign up again, willing to fight again, without that success, that any tide is going to shift unless the manpower is fixed by all of those with a flag in their bio on Twitter or Telegram or whatever. If they go and sign up, instantly can fix the manpower shortages, get training in the West and go. A visit to the brigade's training ground underscores the commander's point. The recruits here are this word, a formal induction into their units. It is a final stage of preparation before heading in a few days' time to the front. The newest of the recruits is Grigory, a 51-year-old former labourer from the central Poltava region. A gold-toothed ruddy face, he squints through +9 prescription glasses with his ill-fitting body armour flaps unfastened under his short, stocky frame. He admits he was surprised as anyone when he was enlisted. He did not expect the officers to mobilise someone who was half blind. Unsurprisingly, he was struggling with the physical demands. It's hard enough to walk with a flak jacket, and he's already got used to handling firearms, saying anyone can shoot. It's hitting the target I'm not so good at with his glasses. Again, this is not a guy that should be on the front line. The situation on the front lines is widely accepted to be as difficult at any time since the early days of the war, with many fearing significant Ukrainian retreat may soon be inevitable. The looming threat keeps the soldiers focused, and they remember the atrocities followed Russian advances and occupation. As weak as Ukraine is, Russia can be beaten, argues Forrest. The proof, an ambush in February when his battalion single-handedly destroyed a mechanised column of 24 Russian vehicles. Again, though, it's February. That's a long time ago on this front. To those who shout we're screwed, I ask them, when hasn't Ukraine been screwed? And Ukraine has been punching above its weight this entire war. But Ukraine's systemic weakness is clearly taking its toll on the morale of its frontline fighters. With no hope of rotation or demobilisation, some of the most committed now wonder if a ceasefire might be the only way out of, again, these laws which are getting screamed for to come in and not coming in. No mobilisation, no rotation, which to me means we can't afford for that. The manpower is way worse than maybe the Western media is actually reporting it. And again, I don't care about weapons. Men, how are you going to fix the manpower problem? People go, oh, you're obsessed with the manpower issue. Yes, because it is by far, I believe, the biggest issue. He says giving away the territories to these disgusting people is no guarantee it will stop, but he admits fewer soldiers than ever share his resolve. It's not even 50-50 anymore. It's 30-70 of people who are up to some amount of concessions here. In 2022, I was ready to tear the Russians apart with my teeth. In 23, I just needed rest. This year, I almost couldn't give a fuck. And this gives us a good idea to how many are actually feeling towards this. But again, like he does point out, but if we do stop, what is guaranteeing that the Russians will stop? This video is doing its rounds around social media, saying to show that these are Houthis from Yemen here, talking about how savage their situation has been, their experience on the front line. Again, any credibility of footage like this is hard to grasp, like how real is this? Again, you're dealing with massive states who have absolute departments who can enforce this, but potentially could be real. We know there are foreigners fighting in the Russian forces as well, and there has been some deals go through. Although every time we hear that these foreigners are going to fight, we never see them in the numbers that it's being told. Same with like the North Koreans. We haven't seen that yet. And like I've said here, first it was that the Afghanis are going to go fight, then it was the Indians and Venezuelans and Mongolians and North Koreans and Somalians. Have we seen this en masse yet? No, we haven't. Now, I've put an asterisk here with the Afghanis because I think if Russia was to try and recruit from somewhere, that was probably their best option. One, the Afghan Taliban are not pro-West at all. And this is where like Russia's relationships tend not to be like, I don't think they're really alliances. It's more anyone who is anti-West is then, it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But what I'm getting at here with the Afghanis is Russia's lifting a lot of restrictions against the Taliban. And also these guys are trained by Western forces too. A hell of a lot of those Afghanis there. Could there be, and as a lot of those Afghanis who are in the Afghan National Army, not Taliban, but in the Afghan National Army, they're getting hunted by the Taliban who are trained by us, who we left behind. Could Russia step in and go, look, if you do 6 months on the front line, we'll give you citizenship and you can leave Afghanistan of being hunted. And to the Taliban, well, we're going to get rid of these people for you and they'll move into Russia, they'll be out of Afghanistan. Could that then work? Because they're already trained, they already know what a war looks like in some degree. What would happen? Could that actually be? I think that was, when it was first speculated, I was like, you could get a lot of guys through this. Recruited hundreds of many men to fight in Ukraine, bought by shadow trafficking operations that highlights growing links between Moscow and Houthi rebel group, promised high salary employment with Russian citizenship through then a Houthi-linked company. Again, we don't have many details actually on this. And again, they're saying mainly involuntarily. These mercenaries shows how the conflict is increasingly sucking soldiers from abroad. Casualties rise as they try and avoid a full mobilisation and the unpopularness that comes with this. Again, all of this, that's just a grain of salt. The Houthis are a militant group backed by Tehran, so in Iran. It's disrupted global supply chains with the missile campaign targeting ships in the Red Sea. Very important piece because the Red Sea, or you have to go around Africa, or the other way is the NSR, North Sea route, which we know benefits Russia. Therefore, Tehran, Houthis, Iran above, Russia targets some of those ships. NSR looks a lot better. Russia and China are building, and I show this every time I see it. They are releasing brand new icebreakers to operate up in there. Russia is an Arctic power. China's a near Arctic power. Russia is the world leader in nuclear propulsion for icebreakers. I think that is a strategic play that is greatly underappreciated of how important that actually is. I can tell you, these big shipping companies don't give a fuck who is bloody which way they go and what they care about bottom line profit. If they can cut their expenses and cut their trips, they can do more. They don't care if it's a Russian icebreaker taking it through or a pilot ship coming and taking through Suez. They don't give a shit. It's profit driven. And that's where the NSR could become more attractive if Red Sea is getting attacked by Houthis. Insurances go up, timeframes go up if you avoid that area. All of this. They're saying Russia actively pursuing contact with the Houthis and discussing weapons transfers. Again, if this is being done, it will be through Iran, and it will be a technology thing to Iran, and that will filter down. We know there are Russian personnel in Sana'a helping to deepen this dialogue. The kinds of weapons that are being discussed are very alarming. That would enable the Houthis better targeting ships in the Red Sea and possibly beyond. Again, the Houthi weapons, anti-ship stuff they've got, it's Iranian, and some of the tech, Iranians will be looking for more Russian tech for piece of this. Any group in the Red Sea, Middle East that is hostile to the US. Again, there is a sort of a brewing Cold War between anyone anti-West and the West at the moment. This is much larger than just Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, and Russia, Ukraine. There is really a divide then growing. And the one who this helps the most, in my opinion, is China. Anyway, legends, have a fantastic day. Look after yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.